That's what I've got it listed. I've got it listed as pilot and or episode 0. So
we can put it out that way. I guess for the recording's sake, we are here on the drive home back after episode 50.
Yeah,
50! Celebrate. No, wait. Yeah. What you got for me, host?
Well, so I was actually, it's a little bit less game related, but we'll see where the topic brings us. So D&D is currently currently showing off their new book, which is actually a favourite of mine, that being Spelljammer.
Right. So that's the sort of sci-fi fantasy setting version of D&D, right?
Yeah. So Spelljammer is a D&D. It was written, back when it was still TSR that owned D&D. And it was written during a bit of a rocky period, along with a couple of other very well-known and much beloved old settings, one of which is very relevant for a discussion of the current, well, it looks like the current one, which is the Planescape. So Planescape being what eventually became the cosmology of Dungeons and Dragons proper. So if you've ever had a look at the Great Wheel and seen we can go to hell. Planescape is kind of what codified all of that.
Okay.
So the very interesting thing about, I know a friend of mine's not particularly big on it, but Spelljammer, at least the 5th edition one, is going to be set in the Astral Sea and is going to involve a lot of jumping between existing D&D worlds, but also the outer planes. So things like hell, and a lot of the actual science fiction elements were original content from the original Spelljammer setting, which was quite different. You were floating through I forget, the phlogiston, I think. It was like a gas medium that existed in between all of the other worlds, and there was all the worlds were contained within sort of crystal spheres that it was very hard to travel between, and that was the whole point of having this magic ship, was that it could actually get between them.
Okay.
And a lot of the science fiction elements, at least, were original content. There was a lot of spacefaring civilizations. There was a lot of brand new worlds that were created specifically for Spelljammer.
Okay.
But here it looks like they're keeping some of the trappings of it. They're keeping they're introducing some of the races from Spelljammer, but they appear to be setting it as you're traveling the Astral Sea and you're going to be moving through the regular D&D sort of I'm not sure what you call it,
the expanded celestial.
Yeah, the cosmology, the Great Wheel.
Yeah, so it's to use a term you think of Marvel, and you think of all the Guardians of the Galaxy, all the stuff that happens off Earth is their their wider cosmology stuff.
All that cosmic stuff.
Cosmic, there you go.
But yeah, it's again, I'm a big fan of all the high level space stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be high level, but it usually ends up being quite a bit more advanced than on the ground D&D.
So that's interesting to me. So that sounds less so for example, to use and it's a really apt sort of counterpoint, because they obviously made the setting opposite when D&D, but Paizo's offering of Starfinder, which is more in line, at least from I've listened to a playthrough of one of the modules in Starfinder, and compared to a fantasy setting, whilst it does have magic in space, it's very much more comes down on the space side of the fantasy sci-fi.
Yeah.
So for example, it's more emphasis on ships. There's more emphasis on technology, implants, cybernetics, guns, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas what you're describing sounds like more like planar travel.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is because they used to be guns were a big part of it. I think they're obviously going to have to refluff some rules for firearms, because when you can go to infinite worlds, then it's kind of hard to keep sci-fi out of your game.
I would kind of hope so, because one, the rules for guns are non-existent in the player handbook, but also, as we've learned very recently, they do have rules for alien weapons, but it's really clunky because no one's supposed to know how to use them.
Yeah. But no, so it will be nice, but they're also going to introduce some new races.
Right.
Which is some one of the cool ones that's caught my attention is sort of like playing as a slime person.
Yeah, you'd think that they would be just as diverse, because fantasy offers very similar to sci-fi. Like sci-fi gives you a bunch of imagination when designing an alien race, but it seems like sci-fi always has the more out there. I guess the conceit for a fantasy setting is that all of the creatures evolve, for lack of a better word, on the same planet.
Yeah.
And so they have to be similar to within a certain degree of believability. Whereas like when you're dealing with aliens, like, they could evolve from anywhere. So you can have slime monsters, gas-filled bags of hate. You can have all these different like very different sort of things, I guess.
No, that is definitely true. It is a bit weird though. Like, you do bring up a good point. Things can be rather alien in fantasy, as we have seen with the Ceramorph stuff.
They give them 3 different names. They're Ceramorphs, they're Mind Flayers, they're Illithids.
So Mind Flayer is the original term.
Yeah.
Which was not copyrighted.
Yep.
And
that's why you see it in Stranger Things.
A bunch of stuff. Most notably, probably Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Has had Mind Flayers in it since the very first game.
Yeah.
So Illithid is the term used in 3rd edition when Wizards of the Coast took over.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting.
To get this, this is our ownership of this monster. Right. The same way that Beholder is a copyrighted term now. Well, I say now, it's been a copyrighted term for like 20 years.
Just fresh off the presses. So Illithid, I was expecting when I was reading the stuff, I'm like, okay, they're going to refer to Illithids, but the book, the Frostbane stuff is more makes heavier reference to Ceramorph.
So I think that's because the little gnome ones
are different.
They want to distance themselves from Illithids, who are more malicious.
Yeah, I mean, the way they're written in this book, they seem to be less malicious.
And Ceramorph brings to mind the phrase that gets used for Illithids, which is the Ceramorphos, which is the process by which a humanoid gets transformed into an Illithid. So I think
yes.
Ceramorph in this case is being used to describe a generalized humanoid who has undergone a transformation via brain slug.
Whereas like the Illithids are specifically humans who have undergone that process. Interesting.
And well, in previous editions, I don't know about 4th edition because I didn't play a lot of it, but in 3rd and 2nd, I don't think they existed in 1st edition, but like in the older editions, only humans would produce a true Illithid or a true Mind Flayer when the tadpole was put inside their brain, which always kind of was a bit weird when they lived underground, far away from the people that they needed to reproduce.
Yeah, it's really funny. I think if you look at the more modern lore of it, obviously in this campaign setting we've got an alien spaceship, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but it's like a plane shifting craft, so it's supposed to be a planar travel ship.
Check out the trailer for Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where so that makes more sense, right? Like they're traveling different planes, and they'll meet the things, especially if they're Illithids, they might then go and reproduce, whatnot. But like in older lore, because there wasn't really that kind of, I mean, they had other planes of existence, but especially really early on, it wasn't utilized for that kind of thing. they're more like, oh yeah, they're from the Underdark, or they're from underground somewhere in deep dank spaces. And as they've evolved to be less of a monster and more of an alien creature, they've sort of changed that lore a bit.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, there's a bit of that old lore in here, in that you guys found that psi crystal in like a gem mine, right? Which is like alluding to the fact that it was connected to the Underdark.
Yeah, and that does it actually say in the rulebook that in the module book that pit goes all the way down?
Yeah, I think I may have mentioned it offhand in the episode or off air, but I can give you guys the juicy lowdown here on Underdark. That is a direct like pit to the Underdark. If you fall there, you take an absolute shit ton of damage. If you've got some way to mitigate it, as we've talked about previously, you just end up in the Underdark thousands of feet down.
Not fun.
Not alone, yeah.
Oh, definitely not alone. But yeah, it's actually funny that you bring up like those sort of changes, because Planescape and Spelljammer were both like ways of like unifying all of these different D&D settings,
right?
Because in addition to, because it's kind of weird, because like, you know, each plane of existence is separate, but then no matter which plane of existence you're on, they all have, you know, the same hell, and they all have the same abyss, and they all have the same Mount Celestia.
So they all have Avernus, but you might be in Barovia, Greyhawk, or Faerun.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it's funny because they were made at very similar times, but the two teams weren't really communicating with each other.
Yeah, I feel like one of the sad things, I think, is like there's so many good settings with like Dragon Rider, Greyhawk. You know, I think the really famous one is Eberron, right? And it feels like it's because things are slightly different theme-wise, but rather than sending them into just a different place in the same world, they just gave them a whole new plane.
I mean, sometimes that makes sense, because you have a place like Faerun, which is like, well, very large and has a lot of like very well explored parts to it.
Yeah, does it though, or is it just the Sword Coast?
In 5th edition, it feels like that.
I feel like all the stuff from Eberron, for example, could be in its own little, like basically from its own city, right? Like a more technologically advanced city.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, I guess they're just afraid of having that being like on the other side of the world from the Sword Coast, because particularly with Eberron as an example, once you have airships, once you can just start flying.
Yeah, but you could ride a way around it. I'm just like they have stuff in the book, like there's a background called Far Traveler, right? And that the entire point of it is you're from very far away and you're very kind of weird.
You stand out.
And like, but I also feel like you can make a way for like those kind of things to not have as much cross-pollination. But the amount of times that someone's like, oh, I want this thing, and they look, it's like, it's from Eberron. Can I play a Warforged, please? Like, unless the DM's being very strict and it's like an Adventure League thing, I don't see many people denying people doing that. And obviously, homebrew settings are slightly different. But I mean, I see people wanting to play other setting stuff in modules all the time, right?
What do they call it? Like the theme park approach to D&D, where it's just like, yeah, sure, do whatever, you know. There's rules for it, so just do whatever you want.
Yeah. And like even within module stuff, like you can fully homebrew world, that doesn't matter. You can pull anything from anywhere, right? But I feel like with a lot of these settings, especially the ones that are similar enough in terms of like their fantasy settings, and not like, you know, Avernus is supposed to be a completely different plane of existence because it's supposed to represent circles of hell. That's fine. That's separate. But like Greyhawk, Dragon, like all those other ones that we were talking about before, they're ostensibly just slightly different fantasy settings with a little bit different theming, right?
Yeah.
And I really think that you could expand on that differently.
Well, I mean, they're different writers, right? It's like
for sure.
Different people who created their own worlds to run their own games. And that, at the end of the day, that is the difference between like Greyhawk, between Faerun, and I forget what the name of the Dragonlance setting is, but you know.
Yeah, I thought that was Dragon Rider, or it might be Dragonlance. But yeah, no, I agree. But like, it's so frustrating for me to be like, okay, and so to set this in Barovia, you travel to a different plane of existence. Like, why is it not just a spooky town on the edge of fucking?
I mean, Barovia specifically has better, you know, precedent to being in a different plane of existence, because it's supposed to be in a plane that is like a prison for evil people.
I understand that, but that could still be a physical place people wander in. Like if you're going to make a module setting all around it, give it give it a slightly better barrier to entry rather than, well, you're walking through the woods and hey, there's some fog now and you're in Barovia. And it's like, okay, cool. Was there a reason why we were chosen?
Yeah, no, I do really appreciate the Curse of Strahd, but
I love Curse of Strahd.
I kind of wish that they had gone, like, at least alluded to the what are they called? Like I can't remember what they call the rest of the Raven Queen's domain.
Yeah.
But like it was like
she's one of the key players for Hexblade Warlords, isn't she? She makes weapons.
She does.
Yeah. So like one of the key patrons for a warlock is the Hexblade is the Raven Queen.
But there's a bunch of other like Dark Lords or whatever edgy title they want to.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like even like from Dragonlance, the Lord Soth from Dragonlance ends up in one of these little pocket dimensions where he gets to live out his own personal hell for all eternity.
Yeah, but I mean, like, okay, I'm not going to spoil anything because people will play Curse of Strahd, and you should play Curse of Strahd. It's fun. There is a character referenced by name in that setting that you may run into, and it's just like, oh, I guess they're here, and it's someone from normal like Faerun, like a pretty major character. So it's like,
oh right,
yeah, I'm not going to say anything because you might run into him, but it's just like, why is this just not part of Faerun? Like, why is it not just Spooky Transylvania? I'm sorry. Like, you can have him trapped in that land and like have different curses. Like, hey, Strahd cannot set foot outside this land because it's a prison for him. But within his domain, he's got complete control over nature, and even gods fear to tread. You know, like you can do something like that, and it's effectively the same thing. Except maybe my adventuring party might actually want to go there on purpose. You know?
I don't know why.
Well, you know, there's monster hunters. There's people getting in over their head. I don't know. It also gives, like, the way the campaign is set out, it's also kind of hard sometimes to justify if someone dies and you want to bring in a new character.
Yeah, so that's a pain.
Either they also have to be swallowed by the fog serendipitously, or they have to come from Barovia, which sometimes slim pickings. You know.
Yeah, there's character choice from Barovia might be a bit light.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like if it's part of the wider narrative, then it's a bit easier to sort of work that stuff in. Anyway, I feel like I've gone off on Barovia specifically.
No, that's fine. But you know, like now we have a real mechanism. We can hop on a spaceship.
Yeah.
I love it. It's great. I want my simultaneous. It's got this very like what's the swashbuckling adventure kind of feel to it.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up earlier and I forgot to do so. Did you ever read? It's a short story. I think it was on the Reddit Humanity. Forums or whatever it is that particular space that collates.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they collate some of those stories, and there was one, and it wasn't like my absolute. I've got some favorites from that subreddit, but what it sort of reminds me of is there's this one story where ostensibly the ship that they are, it's almost like Treasure Planet, where like the ship they are on is virtually a sailing ship. They have a solar sail, and they must, you know, ride the solar currents out, and they could be stuck in, like if they don't have like the wind. And it's almost like when they refer to the black cosmicness, it's sort of like an ocean instead.
Yeah.
And so they must they must maintain a sail which drives a spring as well, which helps power it and all this kind of stuff. And it gives me that vibe where it's like less of a spaceship enclosed in a like sci-fi spaceship and more of like you're on a ship that happens to be able to just travel interdimensionally.
So I'm actually not sure which version they're going to go with. I'm positive that it's going to be the propulsion mechanism is going to be the same because spelljammers are fueled by magic,
right?
Which is how they get their name. So, and how that translates is that when you're traveling between destinations, the crew have to give up their spell slots to propel the boat forwards.
So everyone has to be a spellcaster?
Not everybody, but it helps if most people are.
Okay.
Because if the entire crew is not spellcasters, you're stuck.
Yeah, I was about to say.
But the other thing that it's funny that you're bringing around an old sail ship is that wouldn't work in the old Spelljammer with the phlogiston because it's filled with what is essentially methane.
Right.
Like to the point where flame will cause a localized explosion.
Okay.
So they had to be enclosed because you couldn't breathe in it either.
Yeah.
And like resources and logistics were fairly important, at least in the original one. And it's going to be interesting to see how much of that they keep because we're now in the Astral Sea where people can breathe. It's just that you fall forever if you're not standing on solid ground.
It makes me think of more like you'll have a ship that is more likened to a boat. I mean, even the Inascendant or whatever it is in Frostbane, the Nautiloid, is like it has decks like a ship outside.
Yeah.
It has like a ballista.
The Innocent. I do like that name.
Yeah, it's like the Inascendant or is it Ascent? I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's sort of like structured almost like a ship, but it's got like a Nautiloid feature and tentacles. So yeah, it's you could conceivably stand on a deck outside.
Yeah, and like that is like fairly common for the Astral Sea is for there to be for a lot of like the transport methods like the Gith or like pirate. Well, the Gith Yankee or pirates who will attack travelers. But like,
it could be fun to play a Kalishtar in that setting. The Dreamfolk.
Yeah, no, definitely. I guess the other real thing is, I mean, the main thing is that like environment hostile versus environment non-hostile means that like while you're traveling on a Spelljammer, the only things that's going to be fucking with you are other people with Spelljammers, basically.
Yeah.
Because it's a dangerous hostile atmosphere, but also it's very hard for other things to get into the phlogiston or whatever it's called. I hope I'm not pronouncing that right, but I hope I at least have I'm in the right ballpark. Otherwise,
someone will get mad at you on the internet.
Yeah, no. Otherwise, I'll make someone confused.
You'll also make someone mad on the internet.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that regardless. But then, yeah, I don't know. I think like the cool thing about having it set in the Astral Sea is it's more primed for interaction during travel.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Like I don't know. They don't have as many sea settings in the main module stuff for D&D. There's like resource stuff out there. But yeah, this almost feels like they're getting their cake and eating it too, with having both pirates and sci-fi.
Hey, look, I love Treasure Planet. I think that is the second best Treasure Island movie ever made. You know what the best one is?
Okay, what's the best one? Just
Muppets.
All right, yeah. Vastly less expensive to produce. Treasure Planet's like famously made Disney think twice on that kind
the entire animation studio.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Poor guys, they were way ahead of their time.
I feel like if you re-released that nowadays, that would be pretty big. I think the marketing did no favors.
Yeah. I also think that like there's probably a few other tweaks that could make the existing ideas of those effects, which were probably in their really early stages, look even better.
Yeah.
Because there was a blend of sort of CG work as well as traditional hand animation.
And that CG work is something that you can retroactively touch up.
Yeah, true. Disney, go re-release Treasure Planet.
Yeah.
Also, Sony, go re-release Morbius for a third time in theaters. It'll be fun.
Yeah, do it. Cowards.
Cowards. As I saw that, I think I've talked about it before. I won't talk about it again. But yeah, they could re-release that. More people are kinder to it now.
I mean, yeah. Disney had a weird thing with pirates for a bit there.
Everyone had a weird thing with pirates for a bit.
And then Pirates of the Caribbean came out.
and everyone had a really weird thing with pirates for a very long time.
They're still trying to get that lightning back in that bottle.
Yeah, it escaped after the second movie, I think, or maybe even the first one.
Well, the first one is definitely the best.
Yeah.
I have some fond memories with both the second and the third movie, but I think that neither of them have like that same complete package that the first one has.
Yeah. Despite knowing for sure that I've seen the fourth one, I also don't remember if I've seen the fourth or fifth one.
I remember watching the fourth one with like the mermaids and well of eternal youth and Blackbeard. And
I'm mostly I'm pretty confident I've seen that one. I don't really remember what happens in it. And then the fifth one, I could swear I've never seen it, but I probably have.
I think that's where I'm at with the fifth one as well.
Yeah.
Did Jeffrey Rush back in that one?
No idea. I don't know.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the book for Spelljammer and maybe doing some fantasy swashbuckling, but in space.
Well, there's always room for fantasy swashbuckling in any fantasy setting. In any case, get the fuck out of my car.
See you next week.
See you next week.